He came to fix her Wi-Fi, just a colleague helping out in a storm-trapped hotel. But when Elena whispered, "You make me feel seen," the air turned electric. What she did next left him questioning everything he thought he knew about himself. I never imagined that a simple business trip could unravel everything I thought I knew about myself. But there I was, stepping off that plane in Seattle, feeling the damp chill seep through my jacket like a warning. At 23, I was Nolan Hargrove, still wet behind the ears in the corporate world, clutching my carry-on like it was a shield against the unknown. I'd snagged this junior analyst gig at a tech firm in Portland just 6 months out of college, and this conference on data security was my big break, my chance to prove I wasn't just some kid playing dress-up in a suit. The Emerald City Convention Center loomed ahead, promising networking sessions and keynote speeches, but all I could think about was not screwing it up. And then there was Elena Voss, my senior colleague, striding ahead with that effortless confidence that made her seem untouchable. Elena was the project manager who'd been with the company forever, or at least it felt that way. She must have been around 38, maybe 39. Her presence carried the weight of experience, from the subtle lines at the corners of her eyes to the way she commanded a room without raising her voice. Her dark hair was always neatly pinned, and those sharp green eyes could cut through any excuse or half-baked idea. Back in the office, our interactions were minimal. A quick nod in the hallway, her leading meetings where I'd sit quietly, absorbing her precise breakdowns of strategies. She wore a wedding ring, though she never spoke of a husband, and I figured her personal life was as organized as her spreadsheets. Me? I was the newbie, still learning to navigate expense reports and office politics, feeling like an outsider in my own career. The flight from Portland had been a rough start. We ended up seated together by accident, the plane bucking through turbulence that had me white-knuckling the armrest. Rain lashed the windows, and the cabin lights flickered like they were in on some joke. Elena glanced over, her composure unbroken. "Rough ride?" she asked, her tone steady, almost soothing. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, not my favorite way to travel. Feels like the sky's trying to shake us off." She offered a small smile, pulling a mint from her bag and handing it to me. Our fingers brushed, brief, accidental, but it sent an unexpected warmth through me, cutting through the chill of the cabin air. "Focus on your breathing," she said. "It helps. These things pass." I popped the mint, tasting the sharp coolness, and for the rest of the flight we exchanged a few words about the conference agenda, her voice a calm anchor amid the chaos. We touched down at SeaTac as dawn broke, the city wrapped in a thick fog that blurred the outlines of buildings and mountains. The Cascade Heights Lodge on Pine Street was our home base, a solid, unpretentious hotel with polished marble floors in the lobby and rooms that smelled faintly of fresh linen and coffee. Check-in was quick. I got room 412, she was in 415, close enough to feel like fate, but far enough to ignore it. "Meet you downstairs for the shuttle?" she said in the elevator, her suitcase clicking rhythmically. I agreed, watching her disappear down the hall, her steps purposeful. In my room, I unpacked methodically, hanging shirts to avoid wrinkles, setting up my laptop on the desk by the window that overlooked the misty sound. The conference awaited, and I rehearsed my introduction lines in the mirror, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The first day at the convention center was a whirlwind of sessions and crowds. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air hummed with chatter about algorithms and breaches. I spotted Elena in a panel discussion, her questions sharp and insightful, drawing nods from the experts. We bumped into each other during a break, her introducing me to a couple of vendors. "This is Nolan Hargrove, one of our promising analysts," she said, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder for emphasis. The touch was professional, but it lingered in my mind, a subtle pressure that made the room feel smaller. By evening, the networking mixer in the hotel ballroom unfolded under chandeliers, glasses clinking like distant bells. I stuck to soda, feeling out of my depth among the seasoned pros, when Elena appeared beside me, wineglass in hand. Avoiding the hard stuff? She teased gently. We talked about the day's highlights, but soon it drifted to personal territory, how these trips used to thrill her, but now just drained her energy. Time changes things, she said, her gaze distant, sipping her wine. I wanted to probe deeper, but a cluster of colleagues swept her away. That night, sleep evaded me. The hotel bed was too firm, the air conditioner droning like a persistent thought. I scrolled through work emails on my phone, the screen's glow casting shadows on the walls, when a knock echoed at 11 p.m. Opening the door, I found Elena, her blouse slightly rumpled, a flicker of frustration in her eyes. "Nolan, I hate to impose," she said, her voice hushed in the quiet hallway. "My laptop's refusing to connect to the Wi-Fi, and I have slides to finalize for tomorrow. Could I use yours just for a bit?" I stepped back, gesturing her inside. "Of course. Make yourself comfortable." The room felt intimate under the lamp's warm light, the bed neatly made, my suitcase zipped in the corner, the faint scent of rain seeping through the cracked window. She sat at the desk, her fingers dancing over the keys as I hovered nearby, offering suggestions. "Try resetting the adapter," I said, leaning in. Our arms brushed, and she didn't shift away. The contact sent a quiet thrill through me, unspoken and confusing. We fiddled with settings for half an hour, the screen's blue light reflecting in her eyes, until my hotspot finally kicked in. "Thank you," she breathed, relief softening her features. As she stood to leave, she paused at the door, her hand on the frame. "These trips can feel so lonely sometimes, don't you think?" Her eyes held mine, vulnerable for a split second, before she slipped out. The next morning, the conference resumed under clearer skies, but my thoughts were clouded. I saw Elena in the audience during a cybersecurity talk, her pen scratching notes with focused intensity. At lunch, in the Atrium Cafe, we ended up at the buffet line together, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee mingling with the hum of conversations. "Rough night?" I asked, noticing the faint shadows under her eyes. She shrugged, selecting a salad. "Hotel beds never agree with me. You?" We found a table by the window, rain starting to tap against the glass like impatient fingers. Talk turned to our backgrounds. She from a quiet Idaho town, me from suburban Oregon, and I opened up about feeling like an imposter in this job. "It's normal," she assured me, her voice kind. "I felt the same at your age. You'll grow into it." There was a melancholy in her words, like she was mourning something lost. Afternoons separated us with workshops, but as evening fell, a fierce storm rolled in, thunder growling like an approaching threat. Power dipped in the convention center, and the hotel warned against venturing out. In the lobby bar, I sipped coffee amid stranded guests when Elena joined me. "Trapped, huh?" she said, settling on the adjacent stool. We ordered snacks, the rain a relentless drumbeat outside. She confided about her divorce a year back, how it left her adrift. "Everything just dissolved," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. I shared my own breakup scars, the vulnerability hanging between us like mist. When our knees touched under the bar, the contact felt deliberate, electric, but we both pretended it wasn't. Walking her to her room later, the hallway dim and echoing with thunder, she lingered at the door. "Thanks for the company," she murmured, her hand brushing mine as she turned the knob. I retreated to my room, the lock clicking like a punctuation mark on the evening, but sleep brought dreams tangled with her presence. The third day, storm-bound, the conference halted. I ran into Elena in the gym, her in workout gear that highlighted her graceful strength, me trying not to stare. We exercised side by side, sweat beading, conversations light but laced with undertones. In the sauna afterward, steam swirling like secrets, she whispered, "This forced pause. It's almost a gift." Our gazes locked through the haze, the heat amplifying everything unsaid. Lunch in the lounge, then collaborating on a report in her room, papers scattered, her perfume subtle and inviting. As we wrapped up, she suggested dinner, and we ate on the floor, wine loosening truths. Her hand grazed mine over the bottle, lingering, her eyes searching. "Nolan," she started, the storm mirroring the intensity building. But her phone interrupted, shattering the fragility. She stood, composed but distant. "Good night." At the door, her touch on my arm lingered, leaving me in a whirlwind of confusion. This is just the beginning. You can't even imagine what she will decide in a few hours. The storm didn't quit that next morning, its fury matching the restless churn in my gut. Rain hammered the windows of the Cascade Heights Lodge, turning Pine Street into a river of blurred lights and reflections, like a painting left out in the weather. I was Nolan Hargrove, 23, still finding my footing in a world that felt too big for my ambitions, and the memory of Elena's hand on mine from last night clung to me like damp clothes. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying her whispered words, the way her green eyes held mine before her phone call yanked us back to reality. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not with her, my senior colleague, a woman whose 39 years carried a quiet strength I couldn't match but couldn't stop chasing. I splashed water on my face in the bathroom, the cold ceramic sink grounding me as I tried to shake off the haze and focus on the day ahead. The conference was still canceled, flights grounded, and Seattle felt like a bubble trapping us in its gray embrace. I wandered down to the breakfast nook off the lobby, a small haven with wooden tables and a view of the drenched courtyard where potted ferns swayed under the deluge. Elena was already there, tucked in a corner by the window, her coffee steaming in a white mug. She looked softer this morning, her dark hair loose and curling slightly at the ends, a gray sweater hugging her frame. The lines around her eyes hinted at her age, but there was a warmth to her that made the years irrelevant. "Morning," I said, sliding into the chair across from her with a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, the clatter of my tray louder than intended in the quiet space. She glanced up, her smile cautious, like she was testing the air between us. "Morning? Survive the night?" Her voice was light, but her eyes searched mine, looking for something I wasn't sure I could give. We ate in near silence at first, the patter of rain and the low hum of other guests' conversations filling the gaps. My toast was dry, but I barely noticed, too aware of her presence, the way she stirred her coffee slowly, the faint clink of her spoon against the mug. I wanted to ask about last night, to bridge the gap her abrupt exit had left, but the words felt like stones in my throat. Instead, I went safe. "Any plans for today since we're stuck?" She leaned back, her gaze drifting to the window where rain streaked in relentless patterns. "Not much to do but wait it out. Maybe read, maybe work. You?" I shrugged, picking at my eggs. "Found a library upstairs, 3rd floor. Thought I'd check it out." Her eyes flickered with interest, a small spark breaking through her reserve. "A library sounds perfect. Mind company? I'm going stir-crazy staring at my screen." The library was less grand than I'd imagined. A cozy lounge with tall bookshelves, a flickering gas fireplace, and a single window framing the storm's gray blur. The air smelled of old paper and polished wood, and the carpet muffled our steps as we wandered the shelves. Elena pulled out a worn copy of Alice Munro's short stories, her fingers tracing the spine like it was an old friend. I grabbed a random sci-fi novel, its cover faded from years of handling, and we settled into armchairs by the fire. The flames cast shadows across her face, softening the edges of her usual sharpness. I tried to read, but the words blurred, my attention snagged on her, how she tucked her legs under her, how her brow creased when a passage struck her. After a while, she caught me staring. "Not into your book?" she asked, a teasing lilt in her voice that made my face heat up. "Caught me," I admitted, grinning. "Just thinking. This place feels like it's frozen in time." She nodded, closing her book. "It does, like the storm's holding us hostage." We talked for hours, the fire crackling as our conversation meandered from work to personal corners I hadn't expected to share. She spoke of her first coding job in a chaotic startup, the thrill of late nights and impossible deadlines, and I told her about my college days, cramming for exams in a dorm that smelled of burnt popcorn, the time I botched a group project and felt like a failure. Her laugh was rare, but warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds, and it drew me in deeper. At one point, we both reached for a book on the table between us, a dog-eared copy of The Great Gatsby, and our hands brushed. Her fingers lingered, the contact sending a jolt through me, sharp and confusing. She pulled back, clearing her throat. "Sorry," she murmured. But her eyes didn't leave mine, and the air felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. Lunch was in the hotel's bistro, a cramped spot with red checkered tablecloths and a menu limited by the storm's disruptions. We split a margarita pizza, the cheese gooey and warm, and talked about movies, her secret love for 90s rom-coms, my obsession with Back to the Future. "Don't laugh," she warned, pointing a slice at me, her smile playful. There's something safe about knowing the ending. I wanted to say life didn't come with those guarantees, but I just nodded, savoring the ease between us. Our knees brushed under the narrow table, and neither of us moved away, the contact a quiet rebellion against the rules we both knew. The afternoon brought trouble. The hotel's Wi-Fi crashed completely, stranding us from work. Elena groaned, checking her phone. "I need to send a report, but this network's useless." I remembered a hack from college, using foil to boost a signal, and offered to try it. "Let's go to my room," I said. "I've got some stuff we can use." She hesitated, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't read, then nodded. "All right, let's see what you've got." In room 412, the air felt intimate, the storm's gray light filtering through the curtains. I dug through my bag for aluminum foil and a paperclip, jury-rigging a makeshift antenna while Elena sat on the bed, her laptop open. The desk was small, forcing us close as we leaned over my laptop, our shoulders brushing. Her perfume, lavender, subtle but unmistakable, filled the space, and I felt my pulse quicken. After some trial and error, we got a weak signal, enough to send her report. "You're a miracle worker," she said, her voice warm, her hand resting briefly on my arm. The touch lingered, and I saw it in her eyes too, a flicker of something that wasn't just gratitude. We stayed like that, closer than necessary, the laptop screen forgotten. When the report was done, she didn't leave. Instead, she leaned back against the headboard, kicking off her shoes, one leg tucked under her. "This is nice," she said softly, almost to herself. "Just being here." My throat tightened, but I managed. "Yeah, it is." I sat beside her, the bed creaking faintly, our hands inches apart on the quilted spread. The storm roared outside, shaking the windows, but in here, it was just us, the world shrinking to this moment. She spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nolan, I don't know what I'm doing." Her eyes were raw, conflicted, and I saw the weight of her past, her divorce, her fear of crossing lines. "You don't have to know," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're just here." Her fingers brushed my wrist, tentative, then stayed, tracing slow patterns that sent shivers up my spine. My breath hitched, and I knew she felt it too. Her breathing shifted, shallow and quick. "I shouldn't," she whispered, but her hand didn't move, and her eyes held mine like a lifeline. The moment stretched, fragile as glass, until her phone buzzed, a call from her ex-husband, the screen lighting up with his name. Her face tightened, and she answered, her voice sharp. "I'm fine, David. Stuck in Seattle. I'll call later." She hung up, staring at the phone like it had burned her. "I need to go," she said, standing abruptly, grabbing her laptop. At the door, she paused, her hand on the knob. "Thank you. For everything." She left, the door clicking shut, leaving me in the dim room with the echo of her touch. I sat there, heart pounding, the rain a relentless drumbeat outside. I wanted to chase after her, to say something to keep her here, but I stayed put, my mind tangled in what-ifs. Her perfume lingered in the air, and I wondered if I'd misread everything, or if she felt the same pull I did. What she does next will change everything, for her and for him. That evening, the storm seemed to gather even more force, as if it sensed the unrest brewing inside me and decided to match it blow for blow. Rain lashed against the windows of the Cascade Heights Lodge with a ferocity that rattled the frames, turning the view of Pine Street into a chaotic blur of streaming water and flickering streetlights. I was Nolan Hargrove, just 23, navigating a life that felt like it was accelerating too fast, and the echo of Elena's hurried departure earlier that day left me pacing the narrow confines of my room like a caged animal. Her touch on my wrist, the way her voice had cracked with uncertainty, it all replayed in my mind, stirring a mix of longing and doubt that I couldn't shake. She was 39, with a depth of experience that made my own life seem shallow by comparison, her divorce still fresh enough to cast shadows over every interaction. This pull between us felt wrong on so many levels: work hierarchies, age, the unspoken rules of professionalism, but it was there, insistent, like the thunder rumbling overhead. I tried distracting myself with the TV, flipping through channels filled with storm updates and flooded roads, but my thoughts kept circling back to room 415. Finally, around 8 p.m., I couldn't stand it anymore. I grabbed my keycard, the plastic Kool in my palm, and stepped into the hallway, my footsteps muffled on the carpet, heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. I knocked lightly, half expecting silence, half hoping she'd ignore it. But the door swung open almost right away, and there she stood, in soft lounge pants and a loose blouse that hung off her shoulders, her dark hair tousled as if she'd run her hands through it too many times. Her green eyes were rimmed with red, like she'd been fighting back tears, and the sight hit me like a punch to the chest. "Nolan," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and something warmer, more vulnerable. "What brings you here?" I shifted my weight, suddenly feeling exposed under the hallway light. "I just wanted to check on you. After that call earlier, you seemed upset." She hesitated, her hand tightening on the doorframe, then stepped aside with a small nod. "Come in, but only for a minute." "It's getting late." Her room mirrored mine in layout, the queen bed with its crisp white sheets, the desk cluttered with her laptop and notes, the window offering the same stormy vista. But it felt distinctly hers, infused with the subtle lavender of her perfume and the open suitcase spilling clothes onto the luggage rack. A half-read book lay splayed on the nightstand, its pages creased, and the lamp cast a soft glow that softened the edges of everything. She closed the door behind me, the latch clicking with a finality that made the space feel smaller, more intimate. "That was my ex," she explained, sinking onto the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap. "He's been calling more often, acting like I can't manage on my own. It's frustrating." I took the armchair across from her, leaning forward, elbows on my knees. "You don't strike me as someone who needs managing, but if you want to talk about it—" My words trailed off, leaving the offer hanging. She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes tracing my face as if searching for answers in my expression. "You're too young to be dealing with someone else's baggage like this," she said softly, a sad smile tugging at her lips. There it was, the barrier we'd skirted around, the years between us, her life marked by marriage, divorce, and the quiet battles that came with them, while I was still figuring out who I wanted to be. At 23, I felt like a kid next to her poise, but in that moment, it didn't feel like a gap. It felt like a challenge we were both wrestling with. "Age doesn't mean I can't listen," I replied, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "Or care." She shook her head, but there was no conviction in it, just a weary acceptance. It's complicated, Nolan. Work, expectations. I'm supposed to be the one guiding you, not pulling you into my mess. We talked for what felt like ages after that, the storm providing a dramatic backdrop with its rolling thunder and flashes of lightning that illuminated the room in stark bursts. She opened up about her marriage, how it had started with fire and promise but faded into routine, leaving her feeling unseen and hollow. I woke up one day and realized I'd lost myself, she confessed, her voice cracking slightly as she stared at her hands. I shared my own uncertainties, the pressure of starting a career, the fear of making wrong turns, the recent breakup that left me questioning if I even knew what connection looked like. With you, it doesn't feel like pretending, I admitted, the words slipping out raw and honest. Her hand reached across the space between us, covering mine on the armrest. The contact was simple, warm, but it ignited something deeper, a current that ran through me and made my breath catch. Then the power flickered, plunging the room into sudden darkness, the only light coming from the city's glow seeping through the curtains. In that blackout, our faces were inches apart, her breath mingling with mine, the air thick with unspoken tension. When the lights hummed back on, neither of us moved away. Instead, she squeezed my hand tighter. "Nolan," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "We can't do this." But her body told a different story, her fingers intertwined with mine, holding on as if afraid to let go. I didn't push. I just stayed, letting the silence wrap around us like a blanket. Minutes stretched into an hour, and somehow we ended up side by side on the bed, our backs against the headboard, shoulders touching. She rested her head on my shoulder, a soft sigh escaping her lips. "This feels so wrong," she murmured. "But right, in a way I haven't felt in years." I turned my head, my lips brushing her hair, inhaling the faint lavender scent that had become so familiar. "Then let's not question it, just for tonight." She nodded against me, and we lay there, sharing stories that peeled back more layers. Her childhood on an Idaho ranch, fixing fences under endless skies, my family hikes in Oregon's forests, the simple joys that grounded me. The vulnerability built slowly, like the storm easing outside, until it felt like we'd bridged worlds in that single room. Her fingers traced lazy patterns on my palm, each touch sending quiet shivers through me, and when our eyes met again, the conflict in hers mirrored my own, want battling caution. As midnight crept in, the thunder faded to distant grumbles, the rain softening to a steady patter. Elena sat up, her expression torn between regret and resolve. "You should head back to your room," she said, but her hand still clutched mine, reluctant to release. I met her gaze, my heart in my throat. "What if I don't want to?" The question lingered, heavy with everything we hadn't said. She bit her lip, then stood, walking to the door with measured steps. I followed, the carpet soft under my feet, every inch closing the distance. At the threshold, she turned, her back to the wood, eyes locking on mine. "Stay," she whispered, so quietly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Just stay on this business trip, and lock the hotel door." I reached past her, turning the lock with a decisive click that echoed in the quiet, sealing us away from the world outside, the office deadlines, the age divide, the judgments waiting back home. We returned to the bed, not rushing, but easing into the closeness we'd resisted. She curled against me, her head on my chest, and I held her, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat sync with mine. We whispered confessions into the night, her fears of starting over after the divorce, my insecurities about measuring up in a demanding world. Her hand rested on my chest, warm through my shirt, and when our lips finally met, it was gentle, exploratory, like stepping into unfamiliar waters. It wasn't about overriding boundaries. It was about finding solace in shared loneliness, a quiet affirmation in the midst of chaos. The hours blurred, filled with soft words and lingering touches that spoke volumes without needing explanation. She told me about her secret love for jazz records, spinning on rainy days, her dream of writing stories from her ranch childhood. I shared my ambition to travel beyond the Pacific Northwest, to see places that challenged my narrow view. By dawn, the storm had cleared, sunlight filtering through the curtains in golden shafts that painted the room in warmth. Elena stirred first, her eyes meeting mine with a blend of tenderness and uncertainty. "This changes things," she said, propping herself up on an elbow, her hair falling like a curtain. I nodded, tracing her arm lightly. "Does it have to? Beyond this?" She sighed, glancing at the window. "In the real world, yes. But here, maybe not yet." We dressed in companionable silence, the reality of checkout pressing in like the returning city noise outside. Down in the lobby, the hotel buzzed with guests eager to leave, the air fresh with the scent of wet pavement wafting through open doors. Our flights were rescheduled for later, a shared ride to the airport where we sat side by side in the shuttle, her knee against mine. At the gate, amid the hum of announcements and shuffling crowds, she turned to me. "What happened? It was real for me, but we have to be smart about it." I agreed, though the ache in my chest said otherwise. On the plane, seats together once more, we didn't talk much, but her hand found mine under the armrest, fingers linking in a silent vow as the engines roared to life. Landing in Portland felt like re-entering gravity, the familiar skyline a stark reminder of roles we had to slip back into. Back at the office the following week, we moved carefully, professional emails laced with subtext, brief smiles in meetings that carried hidden weight. But in stolen moments, passing in the break room, her brush of fingers against mine as she handed over a file, the secret lingered, a thread connecting us. It wasn't a reckless affair. It was a profound connection forged in isolation, one that taught me about vulnerability, and her about rediscovering spark. We never revisited that night physically, but it reshaped us, made me more assured, her more open to possibility. Reflecting on it now, that business trip wasn't about conferences or storms. It was about two people colliding in a moment of raw honesty, locking the door against doubts just long enough to find something true. And that's what endured, a quiet transformation that no one else could see.